Finally, we get to the third function of comparative law, which is unification of laws. We can distinguish between unification and harmonization. Unification is a concerted effort by two or many countries to unify their laws, ending up with each country having the same laws as the other. While harmonization is a lighter version of unification, since countries do not end up having the same laws, yet they tend to harmonize their two legal systems. Pioneer comparatists, the early legal comparatists, did believe in a deep unity between legal systems. They considered that, in appearance, legal systems differed, but at the core, in the heart of every legal system, the researcher can find common principles. So they considered the legal phenomenon as one. There's only one legal phenomenon, yet with different appearances. So for these early comparatists, the purpose of comparative law is to study these different legal systems in order to find the rules that explain the unity of the legal phenomenon. This way of interpreting law, of seeing law, can be found in the Article 38 of the Statutes of the International Court of Justice. In this provision, we can read that the court shall apply A, B, C, the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. So this provision implies that civilized nations can agree on a set of general principles recognized by all of them. This provision then stems from this vision of law that we just discussed, that despite the difference of positive legal systems, at the core we can always find common general principles. Note the use of the word civilized nation, which reflects the ideas of that time. A quick reminder, the International Court of Justice was established in 1945 after World War II and has its headquarters at The Hague. Before going any further, we should distinguish between comparative law and international private law. International private law deals with all matters that include an element of extraneity. For instance, a case between two persons from two different countries, or a contract signed at one country and performed at another country. These are cases where there is an element of extraneity. Private international law involves foreign laws. So if one is good at comparative law, he will do well in private international law. Yet there are certain differences between the two fields. The first difference is that international private law cases need an element of extraneity, while comparison could be between two cases, a case in country A and another case in country B, without any element of extraneity in each of these cases. The second difference, which is the one I particularly want to make, is that when we have to solve an international private law case involving an element of extraneity, we have two kinds of provisions: conflict rules and substantial rules. So if we have a case between citizen from country A and citizen from country B, a conflict rule will tell us apply the law of country A or apply the law of country B. It would just refer us to the applicable law, while substantial rule or substantive rule will give us directly the answer. Therefore, when we talk about unification, we are talking about substantial rules, rules that will give us directly the answer, and then this answer will be the same in country A and in country B. I'll give an example. The convention about checks. So all countries who sign this convention will have similar dispositions related to checks. Early comparatists, as we said, believed in the existence of a common legal phenomenon despite of different aspects of legal systems. Their ambitions did not end there, did not stop there. They had bigger ambitions, that of effectively unifying laws. So their domain of research did not limit itself on describing law and trying to find out the common core to all legal systems. They also worked on normative efforts in order to actually unify laws among all nations. When we speak about unification, we are speaking about a concerted effort, meaning a group of countries, by their own will, by their intent, will decide to come together, negotiate, and implement a unified law, the same law that will be applicable in all of these countries. Unification has advantages, especially in international business. Unification gives a direct answer. So it's quicker, easier than relying on conflict rules. And it unifies, when it unifies laws in all countries, it helps legal security. We can know what to expect. So if I go to country A or B or C, I know the same provisions will apply in A or B or C. What is the scope of unification? We can have unification in multilateral conventions that will cover a lot of countries with universal goal, which is very difficult. We can have regional unification, which is easier because we are talking about a group of countries that have mutual cultural affinity. How can we unify? If we are talking about hard law, laws that are mandatory, the first tool is conventions, whether multilateral or bilateral. These conventions can be of two types. Either detailed, that means we will have the same text adopted in all the countries that sign the convention, and the text will contain every detail related to the unified field of law. Or we can have a more subtle, more laid-back kind of unification, when the law just states the big principles, the major principles, the frames. We can speak of a model law or frame law. This kind of unification has more success because it does not oblige countries to have a full unification. It reserves the rights and doubts of every country to change whatever it has to change to keep its own specificities. Because as you will see, there's one obstacle toward unification, which is national pride. When a country is too proud of its own specificities, that it does not want to erase these specificities in order to unify its laws. Another way would be soft law, recommendations. Recommendations are not mandatory, but when a group of countries or certain institutions such as the United Nations or others do vote recommendations, even if these recommendations are not directly or are not mandatory at all, they do have a certain soft power, and countries would rather follow these recommendations than not, even if they are not obliged to do it. Sometimes unification can happen bottom up by practice. When a certain template of a contract spread in practice, whether national or international practice, this kind of template of a contract will become generalized and somehow become a kind of unified law. We can give a few examples of successful attempts at unification. We'll start by the Scandinavian example. Scandinavian countries were successful in unifying some fields of law for at least the following reasons. First, social and cultural similarity between these countries. Second, the unification was not made in a hasteful way. They took all their times by periodical congresses with legal scholars that discussed every aspect. So the work had a real good quality. The third reason is the method. They did not opt for detailed laws mandatory in all their details. No, they opted for model laws, laws that set the main principles, the goals, the results, and every state remains free in working out the details. Therefore, some diversity will remain. Another successful example would be the European Union. I will not get into the history of the European Union. I will just talk about the sources of European law. And I will dismiss the primary sources. The primary sources are the treaties that created the European Union. Treaty of Rome, Treaty of Barcelona, and all their modifications. They do not interest us here. What interests us are the secondary sources, meaning the laws that emanate from the different institutions of the European Union in order to unify the national laws of European states that are members of the European Union. These laws are of two kinds. They can be regulations. Regulations are directly mandatory in the member countries, in the member states. They are directly mandatory and mandatory in all their details, in their entirety. Directives, on the other hand, are not directly mandatory. They just set the results, the goals. They say all European countries members of the European Union should reach this goal. They leave freedom for every country to see how they are going to reach that goal. That means every member state should modify their laws modify its laws in order to reach the common goal. Of course, directives are a softer way, a smoother way of unifying law, because countries remain, and each member state remain sovereign in the way of deciding how to get to that result. The best example is the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, UNCITRAL. You can pause the video and read the small paragraph taken from their official website. This commission's major achievement is Vienna's Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods that unified substantial law, meaning in every case where there's international sale of goods, Vienna's Convention's provisions will be applied. Here again, pause the video, read the excerpt, again taken from their official website. Despite of all the advantages of unification, especially in international business, achieving unification is still difficult because of some obstacles. Sometimes it's national pride. A country don't want to let go of its own specificities in order to unify. Sometimes it's pure antagonism. A country don't want to unify laws because they have problems with other countries. Sometimes it's lack of incentives. They don't want to lose their edge. They don't want to lose their competitivity. They have no interest in unifying. Sometimes we have unification at the level of the law itself, but the interpretation by courts is different in the concerned countries. This happens with the French Civil Code, for instance. So for some legal scholars, it is not enough to unify law. Legal thinkers and lawyers and professionals should have a training in comparative law. Comparative law should be a part of any legal education.